Turning now to the United States, which is sharing its surplus of vaccine doses with the rest of the world.
Having successfully secured enough vaccine supply for Americans, we're donating surplus U.S. vaccine supply and encouraging other countries with surplus supplies to do the same. The President has announced a U.S. commitment to sharing a total of 80 million doses by the end of June. So that's 25 million doses that will go out as soon as possible, very quickly. A number of those are going to even go out as soon as today. And that is 5 times the number of doses any other country has committed to sharing, and 13% of the total vaccines produced by the United States by the end of this month.
Okay, so here's the details. Of those initial 25 million doses, 19 million going to the Global Sharing Initiative. That's COVAX. It helps get vaccines to low and middle-income countries. Jose Manuel Barroso is the chairman of Gavi, and that is the vaccine alliance which helps run COVAX. Mr. Barroso, a real pleasure to have you on the program today. Thanks so much for joining us. I want to start with the news out of the United States of a donation by the Biden administration, 80 million surplus vaccines. But can you help me put it into context when there's a desire and an intent to distribute 2 billion COVID vaccines worldwide through COVAX this year?
We are behind, of course, our objectives. You know what's happening, namely in India. It's a great tragedy there. Of course, we feel our great solidarity with India, but for instance, in terms of distribution globally, what happened was that because of the situation there, of course, there are less doses to deliver. Having said that, we believe we can recover this delay. Our goal, just yesterday, we had a COVAX summit at Gavi. Myself with the Prime Minister of Japan, we were co-hosting, and in fact, we have secured 2.4 billion US dollars additional, so that will make it possible, we believe, to reach the 1.8 billion doses during this year, or at latest beginning next year for the low-income countries, so around 92 countries. But of course, one point we have been asking also is all countries that have surplus doses to share them. So that's why we very much welcome now this concrete decision of the United States. The United States had already announced 80 million doses. Now they start with 25 million, and that's a good contribution. Europe, also the European Union, has also announced 100 million doses to share. Yesterday in our meeting also, there were commitments of dose sharing, so 54 million doses, which goes, so it makes the total amount of doses to be shared through COVAX 132 million. So this is all a contribution because, as you know, there were problems of production, there were problems of supply chain, there are problems of export restrictions, so many problems, in fact, in terms of the concrete delivery to those who most need them.
When you talk about problems and delivery, was it a problem that wealthy countries, including Canada, were taking vaccines from COVAX?
I'm not going to criticize the countries. I believe that, I was Prime Minister myself before, so I understand that the concern of each government is naturally to protect its own citizens. And at the beginning of this situation, people did not know which vaccines could work better. So naturally, they were buying whatever they could get. But what we are now doing is asking those who have surplus doses to share them as well, because there is a fundamental injustice here. So by and large, we can say that the rich world, on average, 1/3 of people are now vaccinated. Some have more than that. While in the low-income countries, less than 1% of people are getting vaccinated. So it's a fundamental injustice. It's true that compared with previous pandemics, we are doing better. It took only 83 days difference between the first jabs in a developed country. It was, in fact, in the UK, and the first in Africa was Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire. So the distance is not as it used to be before, not only for vaccines, but also, for instance, if you remember, medicines against HIV/AIDS that took several years to reach the poor countries. So, but still, we have to be honest and recognize there is a fundamental problem of injustice here. And it's not only a question of justice, it's also the needs of all the countries, because people say no one is safe until everyone is safe. And this is not a slogan, because the more time the virus will be circulating, the more probable it will be mutations and also possible new variants that are more transmissible and more dangerous. So I think it's in the interest also of the developed world to help the others, not only as a fundamental question of justice and ethics, but also in our own interest if we want to get rid of this terrible pandemic as soon as possible.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It is ultimately in our self-interest to be, I mean, you could use the term generous, but ultimately it is beneficial to ourselves to ensure that the entire world is immunized. But when you use, Mr. Barroso, the term surplus, I'm curious how you would define it. And I look in the context of the country I'm speaking to you from, Canada, where we have way more orders than we need to fulfill the obligations to our own population. At what point is it a surplus that should be donated to, for instance, COVAX? Is it now because we know we have a lot more coming and you dedicate, say, 10 or 15% of all deliveries right now? Or is it once everybody has got a second shot in Canada, then you take those extra surplus orders? What is the timing around surplus?
Well, first of all, let me say a very simple word to Canada, and the word is thank you. Thank you, very sincerely thank you, because Canada has been supporting COVAX since the beginning. COVAX announced just yesterday 220 million more Canadian dollars, and that adds to what was already committed before. And including not only to vaccines, but also to the so-called ACT Accelerator, which includes therapeutics and diagnostics. And also Canada has been very active in the so-called COVAX AMC engagement group through Minister Gould. So we are grateful to Canada. Now, of course, from COVAX perspective, if you ask me, we would like them as soon as possible. But each government has, of course, the right to define when they believe they can consider those doses as surplus. But we believe the sooner the better, for the reasons I've mentioned to you. By the way, one concrete point. I don't know if this applies or not to Canada, frankly, but we know that in some cases there were announcements, but some of these doses have expiry dates. So it has to be done before it expires. If not, of course, we have a problem. So as soon as possible will be my answer from a COVAX, so from our multilateral system perspective. At the same time, once again, I understand that governments want to be sure that they have enough for their own population. So it's a question of balance that has to be defined, of course, with those values that I've mentioned to you in mind, the interest to protect our own citizens, at the same time to show solidarity and to avoid the pandemic to continue to, circulate all over the world.
And Mr. Barroso, I've only got a few seconds left here, but I know the year 2024 had been thrown around as the point at which the world would be vaccinated against COVID. What is the possibility it will be sooner than that?
It's difficult to say because, there are many unknowns. And if you ask the scientists, they will say that they know because there are missing variables. They are unknowns. Variants are the real problem. But if not, I believe we can do it according to the best opinion, because of scientists, we can do it before. At least the most acute phase of the pandemic can be controlled next year, 2022, we believe. But there is a great probability, once again, according to science, that this pandemic becomes endemic. So we'll have to deal with it for many years, but then we are already out of this, let's say, emergency situation in which we find ourselves still today.
Absolutely. Mr. Barroso, thank you so much for taking some time to speak with us today. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.